Good evening. This is Pastor Bob Uzzle from the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Corsicana, Texas. Today is April 23rd, 2020. And tonight I want to talk about one of my heroes. Everybody has heroes, people that they admire and respect, that you believe made a difference in our world for the better. It was on April the 23rd, 1993, that was 27 years ago today. This man died at the age of 66. His name was Cesar Estrada Chavez. He was a labor leader, a community organizer, and a civil rights activist. Today, a friend posted on Facebook, and I reposted it, a couple of letters that were written by Dr. Martin Luther King to Cesar Chavez. The two men were just born 2 years apart. Chavez was born on March 31st, 1927. King on January the 15th, 1929. And they both stood for many of the same things, even though their backgrounds were very different. And many, including myself, consider Cesar Chavez to be the Mexican-American counterpart to Dr. King. Both of them were greatly influenced by Mahatma Gandhi of India and committed to nonviolent direct action as a way of bringing about social change. Along with Dolores Huerta, Cesar Chavez co-founded the National Farm Workers Association, which later became the United Farm Workers Union. His ideology combined leftist politics with Roman Catholic social teaching. He was a very devout Christian, a Catholic, throughout his life. And because of his Catholic upbringing, at first he had some trouble working with Protestant clergy who were concerned about social change, but he eventually began to see not only Protestant clergy, but also Jewish rabbis as valuable co-workers in the cause. And he spent 2 years in the United States Navy. And then he moved to California, where he married, got involved with the Community Service Organization, CSO, through which he helped laborers register to vote. In 1959, he became CSO's national director, a position based in Los Angeles. Then in 1962, he left the organization to found the National Farm Workers Association in Delano, California. He did a lot during his lifetime. Again, he was influenced by Gandhi. He emphasized the use of direct but nonviolent tactics to pressure farm owners into granting strikers' demands. And he always imbued his campaign with Catholic symbolism, including public processions, fasts, and masses. He called for a national boycott of California grapes and later lettuce, bringing him to national concern. By the late 1970s, his tactics had forced growers to recognize United Farm Workers as the bargaining agent for 50,000 field workers in California and Florida. Most of the people he represented were Mexican American, but there were some non-Hispanics in the union, including a large number of Filipinos, after they went through a merger with a Filipino union. And his activities were strongly promoted by the American Labor Union and other groups as well. He sought support from the predominantly black Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and campaigned for Robert Kennedy in his 1968 race for the presidency, which of course was sadly shut down by his assassination. And but he's posthumously become a folk saint among many Mexican Americans. His birthday of March 31st is a federal commemorative holiday in several U.S. states, while many schools, streets, and parks are named after him. In 1994, he posthumously received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. His wife was at the White House to receive this from President Bill Clinton. Among those he worked closely with were Fred Ross and Father Donald MacDonald, Europeans Americans, whose activism was primarily within the Mexican American community. And he helped Father MacDonald construct the first purpose-built church in Sal Cipuedas, Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, which opened in December of 1953. MacDonald lent him certain books. And although Chavez did not have a high school diploma, he was very well read. And he developed a love of reading. Among others he read was the biography of St. Francis of Assisi, U.S. labor organizers John L. Lewis and Eugene V. Debs, and of course Mahatma Gandhi, who introduced Chavez to the idea of nonviolent protest. It's interesting that he was involved in the organization of a church dedicated to Our Lady of Guadalupe. It was in 1531 that, according to legend, the Virgin Mary appeared to Juan Diego, an Aztec who had converted to Catholicism. She asked that a temple be built in her honor. I've spent decades studying world religions. That's what I have my doctorate in. And I've developed a strong conviction that symbols are universal in their nature. And as a symbol of the divine feminine, as a witness on behalf of the poor, the oppressed, against the powerless, against those in power. The dark-skinned virgin. She's an Aztec. She's a woman. She represents the oppressed against the oppressors. And thus, she has a universal appeal. There are many Hispanics who are not of the Catholic faith that see Guadalupe as very important to their culture, even if they don't have the same theological interpretation of Guadalupe as a Catholic would. One doesn't have to be Mexican or Catholic to understand the power of this symbol. And her feast day, by the way, is December 12th. Maybe about that time we can take a closer look at her, because she's a fascinating figure. And again, symbols are universal in nature. And among the United Farm Workers Union and there are many of their demonstrations, Guadalupe was on their banner. Chavez was involved in organizing the CSO and later his union in California and other places. He repeatedly heard concerns from Mexican American laborers. They were being routinely passed over or fired, so employers could hire cheaper Mexican guest workers called braceros in violation of federal law. And like I say, he was with Dolores Huerta, was his co-leader for many years. Very important advocate of La Causa. Other key supporters were Reverend Jim Drake, other members of the California Migrant Ministry. These were Protestant clergy that Chavez, in spite of initial hesitation, uh, you can see why. This is in 1962. It wouldn't be until later that year that Pope John the 23rd would call the Second Vatican Council, which would last off and on for 3 years, and bring the Catholic Church into the modern world. And the ecumenical movement was certainly given a major shot in the arm by Vatican II. Certainly one of the most important events of the 20th century. But over time, people have a problem with fear of the unknown. And Chavez recognized these clergymen. They didn't agree with everything his church taught. That's fine. We can agree to disagree on many things and still work together. He found that out. It was in 1965 that Filipino American farm workers organized Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, which eventually became part of the United Farm Workers. He worked with various nationalities. He always imbued his marches with Roman Catholic significance. Again, marchers carried their crucifixes, a banner of the Virgin of Guadalupe, and they portrayed the march as an act of penance, arguing the image of his personal suffering. Pain, part of the journey, Chavez had to work with a cane. At each stop, he read aloud Plan de Delano and Plan de Ayala of the Mexican Revolution. 1966, at Easter, the marchers arrived in Sacramento, 8,000 strong. And certainly at Easter, they were able to tap into that spirit of resurrection that was permeating the world at the time. And eventually, his union was recognized by the AFL-CIO. He got strong support from laborers. And I mentioned earlier, he had been a strong supporter of Bobby Kennedy. He was assassinated June 5th, 1968. Chavez was a pallbearer at his funeral in New York. His assassination just came 2 months after that of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., generating growing concern among the Union that Chavez would be targeted by those who opposed him. It wasn't an easy life. He was noted for many hunger strikes, many fasts, many times of sacrifice. By the end of the 1970s, only one member of the original board of directors remained in place. And in 1988, he attempted another great boycott to protest the exposure of farm workers to pesticides. But unfortunately, this failed. As a result, he undertook what was to be his last fast. It lasted for 35 days before being convinced by others to start eating again. He lost 30 pounds during the fast. He died on April 23rd, 1993, in San Luis, Arizona. He was there helping the UFW attorneys defend the Union against a lawsuit. Shortly after his death, his widow, Helen Chavez, donated his black nylon Union jacket to the National Museum of American History, a branch of the Smithsonian. He's buried at the National Chavez Center on the headquarters campus of the United Farm Workers at 29700 Woodward Tehachapi Road, and the King community of the unincorporated Kern County, California. Then on April 23, 2015, the 22nd anniversary of his death, he received belated posthumous military honors from the U.S. Navy. He sought to promote a Christian radical philosophy. He focused the movement on ethnic identity of the Mexican Americans, quest for justice rooted in Catholic social teaching. And he hated poverty. He wanted to ensure a better standard of living for the poor of all nationalities. He absorbed many elements from the African American civil rights activists throughout the 60s, applying them to his own movement. He recognized that union activity was not a long-term solution to poverty, but he saw that it was important nonetheless. In his office, he had a large portrait of Mahatma Gandhi, along with Martin Luther King, and bust of John F. Kennedy and Abraham Lincoln. He was interested not only in Gandhi's ideas on nonviolence, but also in India's voluntary embrace of poverty, the use of fasting, and the ideas about community. Gandhi focused on sacrifice. Noting that I like the idea of sacrifice to do things. If they are done that way, they are more lasting. If they cost more, then you value them more. In 1973, he received the Jefferson Award for greatest public service benefiting the disadvantaged. In 1992, he was awarded the Pacem in Terris Award, a Catholic award meant to honor achievements in peace and justice. Pacem in Terris means peace in the land, refers to an encyclical by Pope John the 23rd, who served from 1958 until his death on June the 3rd, 1963. On September 8, 1994, Chavez was again presented posthumously with the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Bill Clinton. It was received by his widow, Helen Chavez. December 6, 2006, California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, First Lady Maria Shriver inducted him into the California Hall of Fame. So he's had many honors bestowed upon him both during his life and since his death. March 31st is a holiday some places in honor of his birth. In Laredo, Texas, they have the entire month as Cesar Chavez Month, organized by the local League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC. In Mission District of San Francisco, a Cesar Chavez holiday parade held in the second weekend of April in honor of him. The parade includes traditional Native American dances, union visibility, local music groups, and stalls selling Latino items. So he's been gone exactly 27 years, April 23rd, 1993. But Cesar Chavez left a great legacy, and he should never be forgotten. God bless.